All right, welcome back to the channel. So, Terence Crawford's manager, or Terence Crawford's team, blasts Errol Spence Jr. for asking for a Canelo Alvarez fight, while they at the same time are trying to fight somebody other than Errol Spence anyway. But the most interesting thing is that according to Bomac, Bob Arum is refusing to meet with Terence Crawford's team at all about their next fight. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. Before we get into this absolutely ridiculous scenario where two American men cannot find a way to work together to make a whole lot of money because of the ego and the pride of one of them. One of them, not two, one of them. And that one of them is Terence Crawford and his team, who includes Brian McIntyre. So, before I get into the meat of it, though, the gist of this is that there are certain types of people that, to use a bit of a lowbrow example, that if they have a woman of their liking and that woman is right there ready, they will talk themselves out of the relationship with that female. When most men would just shut up and follow him into the room, Bomac out there, in her ear, so she turns around and said, man, it's okay, I'm done. Thank you. All right, I'm going over there. That type of thing. And that's pretty much what's going on when you actually think about this fight with Terence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. So let's start first with what Bomac said about how Errol is ducking him for trying to get a Canelo Alvarez fight to find a way to stay away from Terence Crawford. That is ridiculous. If Terence Crawford was moving up just one weight class to 154 pounds to fight Jermell Charlo for the 154-pound championship because he could not organize a fight with Errol Spence, I would say that is not a duck. That is actually moving up to fight somebody that is a bigger risk for Terence Crawford than Errol Spence himself. So when a fighter is looking to go do something harder, really harder, not fake harder, not just I'm not talking about like a Jojo Diaz, I'm going to win a belt at I'm going to lose for a championship at 126 and I'm going to fail my way upward to 130 and then beat take some easier fight for a belt at a higher weight class. That's not the scenario with Canelo Alvarez and Terence Crawford. Errol Spence and Terence Crawford, in my opinion, is about a 60-40 fight for Errol Spence. Errol Spence and Canelo Alvarez, at least in my opinion, is about 55 Canelo Alvarez, 45 Errol Spence. And I would say 60-40 if I was not almost positive that Canelo Alvarez knees are shot, right? If his knees weren't shot and he didn't look like he was having a hard time moving quickly in the ring, then I would say, oh no, that's an even harder fight for Errol. However, even at this point, Canelo Alvarez has to be the favorite, and it is a harder fight. It is a bigger fight than than Terence Crawford. I do not consider that a duck. I think that the Terence Crawford fight should happen first, but that is far from a duck. Especially if the guy did everything he could to get a fight with Terence Crawford, and Terence Crawford acted like he didn't have any sense. And what is the part where you're acting like you don't have any sense? You're acting like you don't have any sense when you're acting like you're making money and you're not. Okay? Somebody that knows how much money they're making and knows how much money that you're making and knows that they're making significantly much more money than you are, for you to talk and act like you're the same thing, all you're doing is ticking the people off, and everybody around is just looking at you like, man, what is Bomac talking about? That sounds crazy. Like when Bomac was on Trill Boxing Talk about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago when they first signed this contract, and Bomac was out there talking crazy loose about Errol then. Like, yeah, he's living by paycheck. And then another time, like right before his accident, he was like, man, a drunk ain't shit. Like, dude, there is calling the guy out to make a fight. But then there is just doing things that aren't connected to the fight that are just silly, right? If I'm negotiating with somebody for an opportunity, dude, you walk in the room with at least if I know that this person knows exactly how much money I'm making, if he knows exactly what I'm doing in this other job, why would I sit there and tell this guy and act like I'm making so much more than I really am? Because you know what they'll do? They'll be like, come on, man, this dude is exaggerating. He's exaggerating in this. Maybe he's exaggerating in everything else. So just asking and trying to demand 50-50 from Errol Spence is just, you don't want to make the fight. You don't want to make the fight, especially when your alternative is to get a flat fee on ESPN with no upside for pay-per-view. It's just silly. So either Bomac is a bad, like, I don't want to say he's a bad manager because he's got Terence Crawford where he is, but if somebody else said that, I would call him a bad manager. Like you're giving your employee or you're giving your customer bad consultation. You don't tell him, like, look, Errol, Terence, this is how much money we're making. This is how much money we would make if we took this fight at 50. This is how much money we would make it if we made the fight at 40, right? Here's the profit and loss on it. This is how much we think we could get from the gate. This is how much we think we'll get from the pay-per-view. This is how much we think we'll get of our share of concessions if they do that. This is how much we think we're going to get in a boost in our merchandising. And you look at how much money you're going to make. And it's a lot more with Errol Spence Jr. than it is with anybody else. So why, if you're not going to ask for this, it's just silly. You're talking yourself out of the ussy is what you're doing. USSI is the word that I used. You are talking yourself out of that, man. Just shut up and get the money because Errol, for some reason, is still saying he would fight you. He's not even saying, I'm done, I'm walking away. None of that. He said he wanted to fight with Canelo Alvarez, which makes sense because it's more money, it's a bigger risk, and if he wants to take it, that's his right, especially when he's negotiating with somebody like Terence Crawford, this acting like it's some even money thing going on, and it's not, because it's not even, because Terence Crawford is a main event fighter. However, let's move on to the more significant part of the silliness going on. Bomac was asked at the end, well, Bomac, who are you going to fight next? Because that's always the question with Terence Crawford, isn't it? Who are you going to fight next? Like, if you want to know a duck artist, if you always have to ask the question, who are you going to fight next? Who's he going to fight next? Who's Canelo Alvarez going to? I have no idea who he's going to fight next. I know who he ain't going to fight next. He ain't fighting Charlo. I know he ain't fighting Andrade. Like with Canelo, you can just name who you know he's not fighting, right? You don't know for sure who he's going to fight, but you know who he's not fighting. Terence Crawford, same way. I don't know who he's fighting, but I know who he's not fighting because he's very loud and clear with his actions about who he ain't trying to fight, like when he re-signed with Bob Arum and Top Rank to begin with. They knew none of these fights were happening when they signed. So why are they acting like it's Errol ducking? It's just your cap. Put the hat on, dog, your cap. It's just what it is. And you see, if people lie in boxing so much that I can use the word cap in a comfortable sentence and use it correctly. And at 51 years old, there ain't no way in the world I should be able to do it. But y'all are so cap that it just makes sense and sounds right now. Terence Crawford does not want that Errol Spence Jr. fight. And if he does, he knows it ain't happening within the next, till he gets up out of that contract. He's talking, he's do whatever it is, but you know for sure the next fight that Terence Crawford gets is going to more than likely be a bum, or it's going to be a steroid-induced Alexander Povetkin, and that's what you're going to get. However, Bob Arum isn't even taking a meeting with them. So what Bob Arum said about being sick of Terence Crawford, it sounds like, according to Bomac, when he says that he's been trying to get a sit down, but he can't get one, that Bob Arum is like, man, I'm not talking to you. I told you, go talk to Todd DeBuff, man, and maybe we'll give you a fight. Maybe we won't. Maybe I'll re-sign you. Maybe I won't. And since Bob Arum has that attitude with Bomac, maybe Bomac needs to advise Terence that you guys need to do something different and figure out because everybody around you is saying, I don't know about Bud. ESPN is saying, I don't know about Bud. The top-ranked PBC fighters are saying, I don't know about Bud. You are not a one-man person, man. You got to be able to fight people. You're supposed to work with other fighters to get fights. But like I said, you talked your way out these fights. I think you're talking your way out of these fights on purpose. But we'll see. Or maybe we won't see. Probably we'll never see. However, we will see whether or not Bob Arum resigns Terence Crawford, and when he goes over there to the PBC, if he goes to the PBC, whether or not those guys are really going to be that anxious to fight him. Because even when they get over there, you're going to have to negotiate with Sean Porter, Errol Spence, Danny Garcia, Keith Thurman, and all these guys like you got sense. Like you don't think you're the only one standing there and they're going to give you 80% and 20%. It's silly. Anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think. And with that, I'm out. Peace.